Hey everybody, this is Dr. Glenn and welcome to Dr. Glenn Live, Tuesdays at 12:30. Today we're going to talk about a topic, mold. We're going to talk about mold and chronic disease. And I'm going to tell you something, mold has really just kind of come on the radar recently. For years and years, as doctors, we weren't taught anything about mold. And when I first went out to California in 17 and trained with Dr. Bredesen on doing the RECODE protocol for reversing cognitive decline in Alzheimer's disease, mold was like one of these sort of like, you might see a little bit of mold. And then all of a sudden I'm talking to my colleagues that live on the East Coast, kind of like I do. And it's like, man, you seeing a lot of mold? I'm saying, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of mold. Well, nobody thought about it at the time, but where all this research was initially done was Southern California, and Southern California is a desert. And so they don't see a lot of mold out in California, but here on the East Coast, we've been seeing more and more mold all the time. And I've got to tell you, I'm seeing more now that I'm looking for it. I'm seeing a lot more than I used to. So that's kind of the intro to mold here. And I have seen over the last few years that mold can be a player in all different kinds of chronic diseases, not just in cognitive decline and neurodegeneration in the brain like Alzheimer's and so forth. Mold is a big player there, but we're seeing mold as a contributor to diabetes, to thyroid problems, certainly to autoimmune disease. So we're seeing mold is a really, really big player. Now I've got my I got some notes over here because I've got a lot of images and things to show you today. So if I look off to the side, that's what I'm doing. So let me get this up here. The first thing that I want to mention is mold versus mildew. Now, there is a difference. Mold can usually it might be green or it might be black. And that black mold stuff, that's the really, really bad stuff. Mildew is more, it can be green, but it's more usually white. And typically mildew is what you smell. So if you walk into a house and it has that musty smell, quite often that's more mildew than mold. So what ends up making mold, let me get rid of the one and bring up the other. And I'm going to make this a little bigger. There we go. What makes mold such a dangerous thing when it comes to your health? And that's something called mycotoxins. And so what the mold spore is full of stuff called mycotoxins. And one of the big ones that you see in that is something called aflatoxins. Now, if you want to know what aflatoxins can do to people, think peanuts. So, we have had this huge escalation in peanut allergies over the last, say, 20, 25 years or so. Let me turn that off so it doesn't ding anymore. And, when I was a kid, peanut butter was like a food group. If, you never met a kid that had peanut allergies, but now we see peanut allergies all the time and they can be life-threatening. And one of the biggest things that causes peanuts to be such a potentially dangerous thing if you have a sensitivity is aflatoxins. And aflatoxins, those are a type of mycotoxins, that's one of the big things that you have in mold. So when you have a sensitivity to mold, you can either have what's called an IgG or an IgE type of sensitivity. So let me explain the two different things. Those are different types of antibodies. An IgG antibody is the kind of thing where you would have a sensitivity to something, but you would get a bit of a delayed reaction. So if you got into something, it could be a food, it could be something airborne that you breathe or whatever. If you got into it and a few hours later or the next day you wake up with a headache or something like that, that's an IgG reaction. And you can measure these things in the blood. You can measure both of them, IgGs and IgEs. An IgE reaction, that is when you get an instantaneous and immediate reaction to something. You smell something, you touch something, and bam, just instantly you got the rash, you got the congestion, your airways closing down. This is what happens in the peanut thing with people. They get an IgE reaction, and man, it can go really, really fast. It can be 911. You can have to have an EpiPen for this. Now, everybody responds to this stuff differently, and a lot of it has to do with your genetics. Your genetics have a lot to do with how you respond to these things, and a lot of it also has to do with your immune system and how good a shape it's in, and how much exposure you've had and stuff like that. So when you get exposed to mold, how does it get into you? Well, I've got a couple things here. I'm going to let me make this guy a little bigger here. One of the ways that mold can get into you is through your olfactory nerve. Now, you can see in this picture, your olfactory nerve, it's back in behind the bridge right here, where behind my eyes, right back in there. And the olfactory nerve is actually physically exposed to the external environment. So that's how you smell. Smell stuff, stuff goes up in there, whether it's coffee or roses or whatever it happens to be, it doesn't matter. It gets up in there, it gets dissolved into the mucous membrane, and it gets into the nerve, and it goes back into your brain. Your brain goes, whoa, coffee smells good today. So that olfactory nerve, though, that is a highway straight into your brain. Now, if you're breathing in things like mold, that's the big one, but there are other things that can do this, and it gets into that mold can travel back into your brain, and it likes to lodge into certain parts of your brain. One place in particular is a thing called the entorhinal cortex. And the entorhinal cortex is back in the middle part of the brain, way back in there deep. It's right next to your hippocampus, where you help to create long-term memories. So mold exposure can have a really profound impact on brain function, and especially memory function. So when we work up somebody who's having cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease, one of the things that we want to make sure that we look at is that part of the brain which is susceptible to mold. Is there shrinkage going on there? And we can determine shrinkage by doing our volumetric MRI, which is like really cool. And then we know if we have to go looking for mold, then there are certain things we have to do. The other way that mold likes to get into your body is through this new thing that's now being called leaky lung syndrome. Now, that's leaky lung. Let me get that right there where you can kind of see. Okay, this is really very interesting, and the literature on this is really pretty new. But the same mechanism that can break down the gut lining, and you end up with the leaky gut thing, also breaks down the blood-brain barrier, and you end up with leaky brain. And I think I talked about that just a few weeks ago. But we now know that the stuff that causes leaky gut and leaky brain can also cause this thing called leaky lungs. Well, if it doesn't get into your body by going through the olfactory nerve, which is really a highway into your brain, it can get into your body by breathing it in and it getting into your lungs, and then it can get into your bloodstream, the mycotoxins and the aflatoxins and all these nasty things. They can get into your blood by breathing them in. And so there's this stuff called occludin and zonulin. Let me get rid of, okay. Let me explain this. It's exactly the same mechanism as what happens in your gut. When something irritates the intestinal lining, your body makes this stuff called zonulin. Zonulin then goes in and breaks down the intestinal lining by destroying something called occludin. Occludin helps the cells hold together so that you have good integrity in the lining of your gut. Well, when you get these chemicals made in the gut, they can get into your blood as well. So the zonulin goes everywhere. It goes to your brain. It can go to your lungs. So you can end up actually breaking down the barrier in the lungs, and then when you breathe in something nasty like a mold, it can go right through the blood, the barrier there with the lungs, right into your bloodstream, and then you get that immune reaction, and you can end up with like we talked, the IgG or the IgE. Uh, Reaction in your immune system, and then you end up with some of these common symptoms of what we call a mold exposure or a mold toxicity. Now, I've got a couple little things right here. I've tried to overlay one on top of the other. I want you to look and see. Look at it's sort of the picture first. I'll move this up here so you can see the picture right now. Now, we're talking today about mold, which is there in the middle, along with other nasty things like bacteria and viruses and bugs and parasites and all kinds of nasty things. But we're talking about mold today. Mold can end up affecting all of these different systems. If you know, musculoskeletal, pulmonary, of course, that's your lungs, right? Neurological, that's this guy up here, your brain. Cardiovascular, mold can affect your heart. It'll affect your joints. It can lead to arthritises and all kinds of joint pain. It can affect your pancreas, which is going to lead you into diabetes. Gastrointestinal, it can give you all kinds of gut problems. By the way, if you've had chronic gut issues over a long period of time, there's a good chance mold's involved. It can also affect your adrenal glands and your liver. So I'm going to pull this guy right back down here again. And these are just some of the more common symptoms that we see that go along with mold exposure. Of course, obviously, difficulty breathing, right? That makes good sense. Of course it does. Coughing. I always look at my patients when they come into me for the first visit, and I'm listening. Is there a wheezing going on, or are they clearing their throat all the time? And somebody, this has been a couple of months ago, somebody came in and they were clearing their throat all the time. Oh, that's just me. No, it's not. Something is irritating, the mucous membrane and the lining back there, and can be mold. It can be other things too. It can be other kinds of allergens like dairy and stuff like that. So if you have coughing or congestion, and nobody's been able to figure out what it is, there's a good chance that mold might be involved. So if you've been to the doctor, over and over again over a period of years, and you've never gotten this stuff sorted out, and you're always congested, you're always waking up hacking and coughing and stuff like that, we should check you out for mold and see is mold the thing that's going on. Excuse me, that's not mold. That's because I'm talking so fast and I need to get a drink. By the way, this is not diet. This is just flavored water. Don't be drinking that diet stuff. It's got cytotoxins in it and stuff like that, like aspartame and stuff, which is that's just like dynamite on your brain. That stuff is horrible. All right, so the other things that are common symptoms are brain fog. There's a lot of things actually that can cause brain fog. Probably the most common is blood sugar regulation problems and inflammation. But sometimes that inflammation is driven by some sort of mycotoxin, and it can be mold. Another thing is fatigue. You should not be crashing throughout the day. If you're crashing during the daytime, something is wrong with your energy production. Now, it could be your blood sugar regulation, or it could be mold or something like that is driving your adrenal glands and causing you to have trouble with your mitochondria and you're making energy. So these are some of the common symptoms. So if you've had any of these things going on for a while, you need to get this stuff checked out. Okay? Symptoms are not normal. What is normal is you sleep great, you wake up great, you feel great all day, your brain works, all of your parts work, you go back to sleep, you sleep great again. That's normal. Anything beyond that is something is messed up, and you need to figure out what it is, and if it can be repaired, you need to repair it. Okay? Let's pull those off now, and let's talk about, well, if you have a problem, what can you do about it? Well, there's my 3 favorite ways of checking patients out for mold issues. One is by doing something called a blood lab. So we can do a blood lab, we can do urine, or we can do a little test we have here in the office. It's visual, but let me go over this. Blood test, there is a lab in Phoenix, Arizona called Cyrex. And Cyrex is not probably, unless somebody's built one in the last couple of months, Cyrex is the best allergy antigen testing lab on the planet. They are absolutely the best. Cyrex, the guy that is the main consultant for Cyrex is a guy named Ari Wojadani, and he is probably the most brilliant immunologist fellow on the planet. Another colleague of mine, friend of mine, Dr. Karazi, and he also consults with Cyrex. They have something out there called an Array 12. And an Array 12 is a blood test. We can get it run, and it will go through scores of different antigens, and it can tell you exactly what you have antibodies to and what you've been exposed to. Another one that we like to use, we have the kits right here in the office, and it's a urine test, so it's a little easier. You just go home and you just do a urine collection, and it's really, really great at checking on toxins that we like to screen for, especially when it comes to cognitive stuff, like aspergillus and stuff like that. But that's a urine test, mycotox. It's Great Plains Lab. That it's a really, really good test. And there's another test that we like to do here in the office. It's called a visual contrast sensitivity test, and it was developed by Dr. Schumacher out in California. And the part of your brain that is very good at differentiating contrast and so forth is very susceptible to molds and other kinds of biotoxins. And so we can do a test here in the office. It takes 15 minutes. And we can end up looking at your ability to differentiate contrast, and we can get a really, really good idea of what's going on if you've got an exposure. And then what we'd like to do, what's really great, is if we're going to go through a protocol of detoxifying somebody and pulling this stuff out, doing a chelation kind of thing, that's a good topic we should talk about sooner down the road, is about how do you actually go about pulling this stuff out. It's not a 3-day juice fast. Let me put it that way. There's a whole lot more to it than that. But we can do this visual contrast sensitivity test right here in the office. Like I said, it takes about 10 or 15 minutes. And we can monitor how we're going through the detox. So we can do a few weeks of detox, run the test. Things are better, but they still need a little more work. We go a few more weeks of detox, run it again, and we can use that sort of as our measure as to how well we're doing with detoxifying people. And so those are the 3 tests that we like to use here. Blood test is a Cyrex, urine is mycotox panel from Great Plains, and then the visual contrast sensitivity test, that's Dr. Schumacher's test, and we just run that right here on the computer here in the office. Now, let's go over, hold on, so I'm going to do, I know why I put this in here. I was going to have it come in at a different place, but let me put it right there. This is critical. There are no supplements or workarounds if you don't clean up your environment. If you've got mold in your house, or you've got mold in your office, or something like that, you can't take enough supplements to get around that. The environment, if you're in a moldy environment, you have got to get that cleaned up. It's called remediation, and there are companies that do this properly, and it has to be done properly. You don't just go to Lowe's and get a can of Kills paint and paint over it. That does not work. You've got to get the stuff out of there and do it properly. So let's talk about, though, some other things that are good when it comes to working on mold. There are some supplements that are really very good at it. They tend to be antioxidants and things that help you to detoxify. Vitamin A is a big thing in detox. Your antioxidants. I'll tell you what a great one is pomegranate juice. Pomegranate juice is a great antioxidant, and you can get now not pomegranate. Don't get the cocktail kind of thingy. What you want is you want the actual juice that has not been sweetened. Okay, it's kind of tart, and but that's a great antioxidant. Glutathione is turning out to be like the queen of supplements. It is so important in a lot of things, but glutathione is super, super important in your body's ability to detoxify. It is a huge cofactor in liver function and for detoxification. And while I'm on that topic, let me mention something that we are very, very careful here in the clinic to make sure that a person's liver is functioning properly before you start trying to pull out toxins, whether they're biotoxins like mold and stuff like that, or they're heavy metals like mercury and lead and arsenic and stuff. If your liver is not up to the task, then you can create new problems. So whenever we go and start working on this stuff, the very first thing we do is you make sure that the liver is working properly. Then you start to detoxify. Growing up, my dad was a hot rod racer back in the 50s. And, he was the whole James Dean thing. Or if you ever watched the movie American Graffiti with the yellow hot rod, well, my dad had one of those. It was a roadster version of a 32 Ford. And everybody wants to talk, if you're into cars, you talk about, well, how big's the engine and how fast will it go? And I tell you what, going fast doesn't mean anything if you don't have good brakes. And if you ever watch car racing, and people don't watch a lot of car racing anymore, but I'll tell you what, it's not always the fastest car that wins. A lot of times it's the car with the best brakes. If your liver is not up to speed and you try to detoxify and pull this stuff out and you don't have a liver that can handle it, you can put yourself in a whole lot more trouble than you want. Other things that are really good, tea tree oil. Tea tree oil is a really great antimicrobial oil. And I remember years ago that a friend of mine, there was a product called Melaleuca, and Melaleuca had a lot of tea tree oil in it, and that stuff was great for these kinds of things. And then retinol is also a great product for dealing with biotoxins and things like that. And I put HEPA filter down there, not because HEPA filter is a supplement. Obviously, it's not a supplement. But if you've got a mold issue going on in your house, you need to get it, you need to get it remediated, okay? But the other thing is, if it's like in your office and there's nothing you can do about it, get yourself a air filtration system that has a HEPA filter. And that can be a really important thing, and that can at least clean up your little local environment, like maybe in your office like that. So those are the things that I wanted to go over in our clinic here. We actually we have a product that we use when we find one of our patients in our cognitive decline programs, and also in thyroid and diabetes and stuff like that. But if we find a patient that has significant mold toxicity issues, there's a company that we use out of Denver called Quicksilver, and they have packaged programs that are specifically designed to pull this stuff out. And this one right here that I like to use was formulated by a colleague of mine, Dr. Carnahan, and she is really sharp on when it comes to molds and stuff like that. So I hope this has been helpful for you. Mold is a much bigger deal than I ever thought it was. And now I see mold as a factor in a huge percentage of my patients. Regardless of why they come in, mold can be a big thing. And so if you'd like to know more about that, if you'd like to know more about what we do here at the Carroll Institute, we offer a discovery phone call where you can call in and you can talk to one of our certified health coaches talk to them about what's going on with you, and they can give you some ideas of things that you can do, and they can let you know whether or not we might be able to help you with that. And you can find out if the Carroll Institute is a good fit for whatever's giving you trouble. I appreciate you being here today on my Facebook Live, and have a great day. I'll see you next week. No, next week, I'm going to take a week off because I'm going to go see my grand twins. So, but we'll be back in 2 weeks with another Facebook Live. So have a great day. I'm Dr. Glenn, and I'll see you later. Bye.